Okay, good evening, everybody. I welcome again to my roof deck. It's a wonderful sunset here in Chicago. I hope you saw the lights coming off the buildings before I sat down. I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about one of the concepts that I'm researching for my dissertation, and that is inclusive practices for students with disabilities. And I want to talk a little bit about what those things are, why they're important, and what challenges exist for teachers that are trying to implement those inclusive practices. So again, just to reiterate, I am a big proponent for inclusion of students with disabilities, which means educating them with the most amount of time as part of a general education classroom, part of the school community as possible. And inclusive practices are exactly what they sound like. They are the educational practices that teachers can use to support students with disabilities in their classrooms and make their classrooms more inclusive for students with disabilities. Why is this important? Well, it's important because to really support a student with a disability the best that you can, you need to make sure that the practices that you are using are tailored specifically to the needs of that student. You have to take in the individual characteristics of the person that of the student that you're trying to support. What are their specific needs, and what areas do they need support? What specific challenges do they need to address? You need to have those in order for inclusive practices to be effective. However, there's a couple of challenges that arise, and one of them, the first one is kind of obvious, is that this idea of individualized support, meaning that the supports for the students are tailored specifically to the student and their needs. That can be very challenging and time intensive to do. And when teachers do not feel like they have the amount of time, or they're struggling to implement the inclusive practices, what they end up doing is they end up defaulting to more generic or one-size-fits-all practices, which are not necessarily bad things, but they're just not as effective as the individualized support. Helicopter flying over my building. And the second challenge that arises with inclusive practices that can happen is that practices that are inclusive for one student might be exclusionary for another student. Take, for example, a student that might benefit from using text-to-speech software to help them read and understand text that they're using in the classroom. That might, for some students, they might find that really inclusive. They say like, oh, this really helps me. This is really supportive of my needs. But for another student, even if they might have some reading challenges, their challenges might not necessarily be the kind of challenge that benefits from text-to-speech software. So that support, even though it is a beneficial support, it might not necessarily benefit every single student. Because of these wide ranges of supports, because the needs of students with disabilities are so diverse, it can be a really challenging task for teachers to develop inclusive practices for all students. They really need to devote time and resources into creating individualized supports for each student, but there are only so many hours within the day. And again, when teachers don't have enough time to do those things, they tend to default back to these generic or one-size-fits-all supports. So going back to the example of speech-to-text or text-to-speech support, they might provide that to all students with disabilities in their classroom, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that might not actually be what all the students need. And so there's a tension there, there's a challenge there that exists. What I'm doing with my research is looking at how does collaboration between special and general education teachers affect the development and the implementation of those inclusive practices. Are teachers more effective when they are able to collaborate with a general education teacher or a special education teacher in developing those inclusive practices to support students with disabilities? So that's what my research has focused on. That's something that I'm really interested in, something I'm really passionate about. I think the irony of making this video now, because I'm trying to explain my dissertation, is that at this point, I've already done my research. I'm writing up my dissertation. I have the answer to that, well, not the answer, but an answer to that question. I just can't share it yet because things aren't finalized and I don't want to get out over my skis. But for you, the listener, hopefully that is an opportunity for you to stay tuned, to keep watching this channel, subscribe, give me a like, leave a comment, ask me a question in the comments. I want to respond to the people's questions and try to answer them. If you have a question about what it's like to be a doctoral student, what it's like to do research, what it's like to be a teacher or a special education teacher, I would like to, answer those to the best of my ability. So again, give me a like, subscribe, follow, comment, and stay tuned for more. Thank you.